Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, fellow history lovers, or people just hanging out on a Sunday night with nothing to do. Thank you so much to join. Thank you so much for joining me in my library. I'm Michael C. Hardy. This is Sunday Night History Chat. I am really looking forward to this evening and having everybody, whoever wants to join us, drop me a comment in the box. Let me know how things are going in your neck of the woods, or where that you are listening from or watching from, or whatever it is. Maybe we're bouncing off the atmosphere up there this evening someplace. I know a lot of people are out there really excited about the eclipse going on. I have talked to tons of them the past few days, and know people all over the country. So maybe it will go well where you are. Kind of looks like it's going to be cloudy here, but that is just the way that these major astronomical events go. Hope everybody is doing really well. Bobby Joe Goodson says he's waiting for the eclipse to be over there in Arkansas. I imagine so. Yeah, it's good for your tourism dollars. There are a lot of our friends, Jason and Adam and Robert out in Arizona, and Corey and Niels, and hope everybody is doing really well. No exciting events going on this upcoming week. We spent Thursday, Elizabeth and I did, at Sycamore Shoals State Park, filming for a series for the Tennessee State Library about the history of that area, the Watauga Association and the Transylvania Purchase, and the siege in 1776, and the march to Kings Mountain in 1780. So really good day. Have nothing else going on this week. Next weekend, the Time Traveling Hardys will be at the Blockhouse, Lord willing, in Duffield, Virginia, Natural Tunnel State Park, or Natural Tunnel State Park. I encourage everybody to come on out and visit with us. We will have more details here in the near future as we get closer to that event. This evening, I have with us a friend of mine, John Blankenship. He's going to join us this evening. How are you tonight, John?
Michael, I'm good. Glad to be here with you and looking forward to talk a little bit of history.
How does that eclipse tomorrow where you live? John lives in West Tennessee. Is it going to be cloudy?
It'll be a little further northwest for us, more towards the Missouri Boot Hill. We'll kind of be on the edge, so we'll get to see some of it, and we'll talk some about that in library stuff tonight too. So we'll be having a viewing party outside, so it should be a fun time.
Oh yeah, fun time. So John lives over, as I said, over in West Tennessee, in the Humboldt, Gibson County, Madison County area. Not quite to Memphis, which is probably a good thing, but over I don't know, 7 or 8 hours from my side of the mountain here. But I'm happy to welcome John to the library this evening. John is actually a librarian. And so he probably looks at my shelves and thinks, oh my gosh, they're so disorganized.
No. Well, you're just seeing just a few of my books here in the background. If I could turn the camera and show you the other history room / office, it's similar to yours. It's packed full.
Absolutely packed full. So John, tell us, how did you get interested in history?
Well, let's try to make a long story kind of short. Go back 25 years or so. My dad actually sold baseball cards. He was a collector and would sell some on the side as well. So through that connection, he was selling to a local gentleman who had a clothing store, and he was good friends with our county historian at the time, the late Mr. Fred Culp. And Mr. Culp collected, kind of like us, he collected everything and kind of got into the ball cards world. So through that connection, we got to go to his old house out in the country, just outside of Humboldt here, and got to know him. Of course, Dad was there to kind of talk sports and stuff, but I got quickly interested in all the history items, the collection that he had there of local stuff. And it was really fun, Michael, when you went in to see Mr. Culp. You didn't sit in his living room. You didn't sit in his den. You sat in his bedroom with him. And why that is, you may wonder, is he was a huge collector. And I guess I've kind of got that thing too. And through that connection, begin to ask questions, learn local history. And and grandmother on my dad's side, my dad's mom, she was kind of the family collector as well for her side of the family. So that came natural through that. I would begin to collect through there, and you'd get family and then local history of West Tennessee just came natural at that point. And
Right.
there, went and did the thing, grew up, turned 18, spent a couple of years, always was interested in history, but did the thing us teenagers, we all did at that time. And then in the early 2000s, again, that interest really came back and really got involved in local stuff and in the county. And long story short, Mr. Culp passed away in 2017 and was appointed the official Gibson County historian in early 2018. So an honor to follow someone that served in that position for over 50 years. And we have a local historical society I'm president of, a local history museum, and lots of stuff we'll probably talk about some tonight. But
Right.
it's just got to talk to grandparents that were World War II veterans and learn from them. And it was just natural that all this stuff would fall together.
It is. It is. It's amazing that Tennessee
Mhm.
has each county has an appointed historian. We don't have that in North Carolina.
Oh, okay.
That is not something that our legislative body, our General Assembly, has ever done. Even though I'm kind of the unofficial official
Mhm.
historian for the county that I live in, it's not an official title.
Yeah. Well, that's
Uh,
interesting. They do that. All, of course, 95 Tennessee counties have them. There's a few that are vacant. And something we see, I'm sure you've seen in your area, and we see it in history world as a whole. There's not younger folks coming up. I'm probably somebody recently said the youngest county historian in Tennessee. I'll be 42 years old tomorrow.
okay, happy
And
birthday.
yeah, well, thank you. Uh, so there's not a lot of young folks coming into this. That's why it's important to teach and to share history. I
It
always
is.
say the good, the bad, and the ugly. It's not always pretty, but it's also got some good stories as well. So it's important that we share this and get folks interested. If not, how do we learn from it if we don't study it and research it?
I wholeheartedly agree, and that's a conversation I'm having. I have all the time. Of course, you've hung out here with me on Sunday nights
Yeah.
before, and that's a conversation that's always running through my mind and the people that I meet. We just set up our 250th committee here in the county I live in,
Hmm.
about 2 years late,
Yeah.
um, and just Isabella is kinda on the committee, so I guess her being
Hmm.
17, she would kinda be the youngest person on that committee, but just about everybody else is older than I am.
Well, we
Um,
just celebrated our 200th anniversary in October for Gibson County. It's 200
right,
years old. This is the first official full year as a county, when in January, of course, the government side was put together. So we've just gone through ours. It could have been bigger than what it was, but
right.
we had a gathering at the courthouse in October and some celebration there with music and did some little history talks in between. But it's important. And like you said, the 250 that's out there now,
Yeah.
it's something I haven't really seen anybody in West Tennessee that I think has really picked up on.
And that's, you know, I talk a lot about the bicentennial celebration. Of course, I was like 6, I think, in 1976 when that really, exploded, for lack of a better word, and it
Yeah.
seemed that there's everything going on. There was that bicentennial train that went across the country that I
Mhm.
just barely remember, and there were all kinds of exhibits and everything. And I know here in the county I live in, our museum started in 1976 as a part of that bicentennial
And that's kind
celebration.
of the way ours did as well. We have a
Yeah,
one here in Humboldt in the late 70s. I think it was 78 when it finally got together.
yeah,
It really featured our local strawberry festival we have here, but it was also had some local history stuff. But that all sparked from the 200.
yeah. But I'm not seeing that right now.
No, it's
Maybe it
just not happening.
exists in other places, but it's just not really happening here. It's been a drive. I've been sending notes going, "Hey, we need to do something about this."
Hmm.
And I think finally, maybe we're supposed to have our third meeting next week. So maybe, maybe a big maybe.
Here's
Maybe
something
some
I
other
think.
people will do it, and Michael won't have to do the whole thing.
Well, something I think we see is as the world changing, COVID really changed that. We're doing this remotely in two different states and talking.
Yeah,
It's been tough to get people together for all our clubs, not just
it
history
has.
groups, but your Rotary clubs, your Lions clubs. It's a
Yep.
struggle to get people together again, and We're losing so much. This works and it's great. I love this, but it's hard to get people together, local things to do, local discussions and programs.
It sure is, and that is a struggle, a real struggle. So, if I were to come into your library,
Yeah,
there in, you're in the Humboldt County
I'm in
Library?
Humboldt. Yeah,
Okay. Which Humboldt himself is a fascinating person.
yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
Came to the United States once, and we've got all of this stuff named after him. But anyway, that's probably another discussion. But if I were to come into your library in Humboldt County, and I would say, John, I'm interested in local history,
Hmm.
what would you have for me? Now, I'll preface this to
Sure.
say I don't think I've ever been to your library in Humboldt County.
We'll have to get
Um,
you this way. Hmm.
I don't think I have. Back when gas was cheap, we used to wander quite far. Uh,
Yeah, now it's it's tough. Hmm.
it is. But if I were to come into your library and say, "Hey, I'm
Sure.
really interested in this subject, in this community," what would you have for me?
Yeah, I'm going to have several. Of course, most all of our local history books that have been published from the city of Humboldt here, and then Gibson County, the other surrounding towns. There's several books that have been done. I'm going to direct you probably that way first, but something I like, of course, being a historian as well, it's kind of an advantage to be the director of the library and that. So when those people come in, they're naturally going to come to me. And I usually quiz them with a few things and say, well, what are you looking for? What's your connection here? Get some basic questions out there. And in the best way to direct them, sometimes they just need basic genealogy help. Just they're getting started or they're coming in for a specific topic. And it's really nice to have somebody in a library. And that's what I encourage other library directors to do is find somebody, even if it's on a volunteer basis, to do that. When you come in, that you can direct somebody, maybe not in this library, but I can say you can go to one town over
Right.
and you'll find this topic. So,
I sometimes think our local library has my number on speed dial.
yeah, I know how that is. Everybody in the county refers them to me. And if somebody comes into the city and say, I'm looking for something history wise, I know I'm going to get a phone call or a visit.
That's right. That's right. Now they don't give out my number, but they will call me and say, "Hey, we've got this person here looking for this. What can we tell them?" So I guess that's an honor. I guess that's a good
Mhm.
position to be in.
But to kind of
Um,
answer, go and expanding on your question there, something I really want to keep in our small genealogy space that we have here in Humboldt is really get things not only the local counties, but I really like to get some North Carolina stuff, which is in your neck of the woods there,
right.
because most of the folks in Gibson County made their way maybe either through Columbia, Tennessee, through Murray County, and eventually came from Wake County. We see some Burke County folks here, the old Orange and Johnson County,
Yep.
come this way. So I try to keep some stuff there that you may not find on such as Ancestry or Family Search, that people have some access there to those records.
So in the 1770s and 80s and 90s and early 1800s, I actually right now where I am would have been in Burke County.
Okay.
Uh, it was a vast area up until probably about 1830 when Yancey County was created. So if you ever got any Burke County questions,
Yeah. Of course, that
uh,
area, Wake County, is where most of my ancestors that settled in Gibson County back in the 1820s would have came from. They would have been in that area near the Neuse River, if you're familiar with that area.
oh yeah,
They came all from around that area near Raleigh, not too far from it. So a neat connection, and it's fun stuff.
it's amazing how small our world is.
Yeah,
Um,
that we're really connected, and I find people that locally that come into the library looking for research and needing help, and before you know it, we find out we're cousins.
oh yeah, oh
It's
yeah.
very common to
Sometimes you
see
don't
that
have to
happen.
talk very long to figure that out.
Yep. Mhm.
It happens pretty quick. Um, so when it comes to, and I know a lot of our folks are really interested in that 1860s time period, war
Yep.
between states, Civil War. Um, what kind of resources do you have about that there in your library or in your district? Now you got some pretty big events with Nathan Bedford Forest around
Yep.
there,
Mhm.
and Shiloh is just a little to your south
Yeah.
ish area, but
There's
what
something
local
that's
do you have?
really never happened here that it may be a task that I need to complete with some others and assisting in it. It's a really good war between the states, Civil War history of this area. We've got some small things on some of the different companies that have been done. but nothing that's ever really been fully published to explain, like the 12th Tennessee, the 47th.
Right.
It's never really been broken down. Of course, you can go to your Tennesseans in the Tennesseans in Civil War.
Mhm.
Those books are good resources, but there's really nothing that's really ever been broken down too much in this area.
And I think that's a challenge for all of us. Once again, um, my song and dance, about how important that local history is. And we may say that there are not a lot of young people interested, and that's probably 99% true.
Yeah.
But for that 1% that do walk through the door of your local museum or my
Mhm.
local museum, having that information out there, I think, is vital. Um, you know, because there are
Mhm.
some folks, even older folks, that are interested in
That's true.
all aspects of that history. Um, and sometimes I want to say, and I want to think that it's a recent thing that people have become
Mhm.
disinterested. But I think it's always just been a small group of us people who are passionate
That's true.
about
That's very true.
that history.
The thing is
Um,
so important. Me and a gentleman were talking the other day is you've got to reach people that get them interested, get a personal connection. If we're talking about the war between the states, we hear of the Forest, who to this area is a local legend. He's a living legend,
mhm,
larger than life. But to connect to that common soldier that
yes,
they're directly blood related to, and be able to
yeah.
show them that they were here or through their official records and they were wounded at this battle, you can really connect with people. And I think that's how to get them, that it's not just these big stories you hear, but on a local level, they were important too. And you had ancestors that were a part of this.
A lot of times, if I'm out in the community at the grocery store or the gym or some other place, people don't usually come up and ask me about Gettysburg. They
Hmm.
want to know about this person and their family and what happened to that person. And I'll give a really good example about that. I was working at our local museum on my book on the 58th North Carolina troops. There's the
Hmm.
commercial for this evening. And this lady comes in and says, well, my ancestor served in that regiment, but we don't know what happened to him at the end of the war. And they had this great story. He was trying to hide out and avoid both armies, and the Confederate conscription came in and got him. And I
Hmm.
was able to tell that lady that he died about 4 weeks after that event of
Oh, wow.
some disease in a hospital in Atlanta, and the family had never heard of that story.
Well, I'll give you a good example I've recently found. The last 4 or 5 years, researching some of the last name of Bledsoe here that was in Gibson County. None directly that we knew that served in the Confederate Army for sure. There was one by the name of James Bledsoe that would have been in the 12th Tennessee, but really couldn't connect him. There's just not enough records by the time he was born to prove it. But another cousin had a copy of the original Bible page when with their births and mentioned him. And there's a little scrap of paper that's in there that says James Bledsoe was, paraphrasing some of it, was killed in Athens, Alabama, and was buried on such and such date. And this is to remain in the Bible. Well, then you can go to the Athens City Cemetery and you can see that the SCV camp there put a monument up many years ago for him. And uh, it's that personal connection. His family here and my great great grandparents would have probably never known really what happened to him, never got to visit his grave, but to be able to
Right.
go there and do that and make that connection and to know what happened to him, it's something.
It's it's funny that you mentioned Athens, Alabama. That's where my dad was born.
Okay. Oh, wow.
I've
Small
I've
world.
got like 3 Confederate ancestors buried in various cemeteries there in Limestone County, Alabama.
Well, we may actually even have a connection. Some of my Todd ancestors, TODD, that were here in this area came from North Carolina as well. But one of
Right.
their ancestors, this is going back late 1700s, his name was Hardy Todd. Well,
Huh,
his mother was a Hardy.
fantastic.
So we
We'll have to sit down
may
and
have a connection there.
there's actually a Todd community in the county north of me.
Okay. Oh, wow.
Um,
Hmm.
but Todd family up there, Watauga County, um, the Todd community is named for a Confederate soldier
Hmm.
who served, I think, in the First North Carolina Cavalry, and then he was a lawyer after the war. Um, but yeah, hey, small world.
It is.
We talked a little bit longer about that. We'd figure out how we were cousins.
Yeah, definitely are. Somewhere along the way.
So let's talk about a difficult subject to mention. Once
Sure.
again, one that I bring up from time to time. I know that the library in Sullivan County, Tennessee, and
Hmm.
McDowell County, North Carolina, have really either totally got rid of their local history collections
Yeah.
or seriously gutted them. Um, and I brought this up before. I was at the state archives 2 or 3 weeks ago, and
Hmm.
I was literally the only person in the archives. And I
Yeah.
think of all my
Hmm.
years, that's like the first time that I've only been the only person in there working. And I asked a friend in there, I was like, what's going on? And he goes, well, there's so much stuff digital that a lot of people don't feel like they need to come. And maybe that's why these libraries are getting rid of all this stuff, is
Hmm.
because it is digital. But this can all go away in a heartbeat.
That's true. And it's important to keep those local collections, those paper copies still in existence. I mean, a majority of the people that are going to do their ancestry, as you know, Michael, look for the basics. That's all they want to know. You can find a
Yep.
good portion of that online, but still in these local libraries that have just certain books in particular that have been published by some local lady that put together 100-page book that told these stories. We see those all the time. And of course, we have in Tennessee in the library system, the regional library system in Tennessee, um, basically have a forum service that people can give away items from different libraries. And I'm all the time acquiring those flyers because their collections, they just weed them out. And I see the reasoning. If it's not circulating, ultimately it hurts your numbers as a library as a whole. But it's sad to see those just sometimes just get disposed of and thrown in the trash.
It is. It is. And I know one of our folks who are sometimes here on Sunday nights, Randy, who lives not far outside of Kingsport, actually hit that library sale recently at Sullivan County and loaded his car, truck, whatever up
Hmm.
with North Carolina and Tennessee books. But all I can say is we've just got to keep fighting and sharing.
Yeah, it's true.
Fighting and sharing. Of course, and you mentioned right before we went live, it is National Library Week.
Yeah, that kicked off actually officially today, runs through next Saturday, and it's a time to promote libraries. And we'll do a couple of local proclamations. Our county mayor, the Gibson County mayor, is going to do one, and then our local city mayor here in Humboldt will do a proclamation tomorrow. It's just a way to raise awareness of what libraries are more than just books. As you know, as you've been around the library world, that programming is a big thing. That's something big, local children's programming for us that does really good. In the
Right.
homeschool world, we really reach a lot of folks in our tri-county area, which is Gibson, Madison, and Crockett, where we're kind of centered in the center of all that. So that's a growing thing too. But technology usage, we think, it's something I always tell people all the time. You think, well, who needs to come to the library to use a computer anymore?
Right.
You'd be surprised. It's all age groups. Just because everybody has their smartphone, they don't have access to type up documents when they need them. And
Right.
it's all economic statuses that come through too.
Uh, I'm I probably use my local library the most for their microfilm reader,
Yeah.
because there are many things that are not digitized that I can still order the whole roll of microfilm for $12,
Hmm.
and I can't drive to Raleigh for $12.
Now, it's still good to get those from your state library. I do some here. And of course, with the reader we've got here in Humboldt, which is purchased in the last couple of years, I can digitize that whole roll pretty
Yep.
quickly.
Yep.
And then to have that digital file, or you can pay the state library. I think here in Tennessee, it's like $90 to digitize a
Yep.
35 millimeter roll, which is get it, spend the $90. You can spend hours and hours researching.
Yep, and that's really, really good stuff. So I'm gonna put you on the spot since it's National Library
Yeah.
Week. Do you have a book you would recommend?
Oh gosh. Now, this is what I tell all our library patrons. We'll have some that I known my whole life. They'll come in, they'll say, "What is your favorite book right now?" I said, "Now I'm going to surprise you because it's probably not going to be a fiction book or something like
Yeah,
that, or some of the James Pattersons, the C.J. Boxes. It's going to be local history, and there's been a
yeah.
couple of those that have come out recently in this area that picked up. One is up in Henry County, Tennessee. They've done kind of a pictorial slash history, and so that's probably been one of my favorites here recently.
Awesome.
Mhm.
And I encourage the folks that are joining us this evening that are watching, if you got a favorite book, please drop it on the list.
Of
I've
course, my favorite here for me is going to be what's known as Gibson County Past and Present.
Right,
Was written in the 1960s by our former county historian, Mr. Fred Culp, and
right.
just an invaluable resource to have. And his research that he did at that time is one of those I always seems like it's always with me. It's either digitized on Google Drive or I've got the actual book in the car with me, it's always a resource to go to.
And I'm glad you have that resource because in the county I live in, the only county history we have ever had was done in 1964. It's 100 pages with no notes and no index.
Oh, wow. Makes it
A-
tough.
And I actually created a index. I've never really shared it with anybody, but I actually created an index for that book like 15 years ago,
Oh,
so
wow.
I could sit
Mhm.
down and find stuff in it. But I'm glad that you have that resource. But I worked as a librarian for a number of years,
Mhm.
a long time ago, in a different lifetime, almost it seems. And people would come in all the time looking for that book recommendation.
Yeah.
Uh, and it's always good to have something that you would recommend. I've been working on this aviation book and I've read some real winners
Mhm.
and I've read some stuff that is just not that good. It's amazing what people can get published these days.
Well, you
Uh,
kinda mentioned that, and this might be something interesting for us to kinda talk about, of course, you being an author yourself, is AI, which is a big deal right now with the Chat GPT and so many other
yeah,
things that people are now we had a conference recently where they're talking about books are being fully written by AI.
yes.
What are your thoughts on that? How does that
It,
affect somebody like you?
well, of course, I have my partner in crime sitting right over here,
Mhm.
who has to grade papers written by AI, students and everything. And most of it's a train wreck. I have,
Not even good paper.
um, yeah, Elizabeth, can I tell them about the two?
Don't be too specific, but you can say
Okay,
yes
well,
if
she
you want.
had two that were failing when she graded them, and then a day later discovered that they were written by AI.
Oh,
Uh,
wow.
so
Mm.
if you're a young person out there listening to us this evening and want to use some type of AI to write your paper, don't do it because you may not pass.
Not only are you a dishonest cheat, but you're a failing dishonest
Yeah,
cheat.
she's over there. Not only you're a dishonest cheat, you're a failing dishonest cheat.
Yep.
But
Mhm. I mean,
you
it's
know,
got its advantages to help on things. I mean, if you've written a paragraph and maybe you need some help with the grammar, there's good things to it, but
there
still,
are.
you're losing the creative touch if ever something's automatically writing it for you.
Well, there was a post
For no reason.
that somebody sent me probably a year ago that was on the county next door to me, and it was about all this great history that this county next door to me had.
Mhm.
And two-thirds of the stuff on the list was not even from that county.
Oh, wow.
And, it's mentioning events. I actually think it mentioned Gettysburg, which of course is like 8 hours
Long
from
way.
here driving today.
Mhm.
And I think if they could, as Elizabeth often says, if they could teach AI to wash the laundry and the dishes,
Or
so
we'd
I
have
would
it
have more
made.
time to
Mhm.
go write poetry instead of AI writing the poetry for me, man, I would be
Mhm.
all over that. But I do think AI is a good thing. I hang out a lot in that science world as well.
Yeah.
And some of the programs and things that they use in astronomy, uh, that are just mind-boggling things. But as far as writing papers and books,
Mhm.
maybe one day we'll get there. But I,
I mean, here's the thing, if it's pulling information, as we know, just from the internet itself,
yes,
how do we know the information it's pulling is even accurate? Because there's so many, as we know, inaccuracies. It's just, hey,
yep,
it's on the internet. You better take it for truth. People's papers and books are being written with inaccurate information.
yep. Well, on my blog that I've had for a long time, looking for the Confederate War. Um, mine, for a long time, I'd have a couple hundred hits a day, which are great. Well, for the
Hmm.
past year and a half, it has been um, 1,500, 2,000 hits a day.
Oh, wow.
And so, I was talking to a couple of other people around it, and I'm getting, as they say, scraped. So the
Hmm.
AI whatever bots are out there taking my information and probably putting it in some student's paper, which I guess that's a good thing. But maybe the professor will learn something from it.
Yeah, I mean, then you get into a lot of legal things on this. Is it
Yep.
properly sourced? If it's just using your information, you're probably not getting sourced for the most part.
No,
Or
no.
if you are, that's, I mean, you're losing the work you and put into and the research time you've put into, somebody else is taking it. And
Yeah, there is that ethical aspect of it.
Mhm.
Um, I imagine at some point in the near future, we'll probably start seeing AI generated War Between the States books out there
Oh yeah.
um, that we're going to spend money on,
Boycott them.
and
Mhm.
they're not going to be any good. And yes, we should boycott them, but we won't know until somebody actually sits down and reads it.
Gasoline.
Yeah.
And does that type of process. But
Well, a
of
lot of the
course,
kind of stuff we're interested in, like you're writing, is especially is this is stuff you've got to go to these libraries, you've got to
yeah,
go to these archives
yeah.
to find this information and these newspaper sources and diaries. Just the generic internet just is not going to give you that information. Somebody's got to research it.
Yeah, that's right. Somebody has to research it, and it does take an enormous amount of time to put that stuff together. Our friend Andrea Quinn there up in the New England area says, Michael, it's all good to pull your stuff through AI unless Elizabeth gives you a failing grade. And I will say, Andrea, you think Elizabeth's hard on her students? You should see what she does to my stuff. I mean, I'll have her come read something and she'll sit down and say, you can't say that. And I'm like, well, I did. It's like, no, you can't say that. And she'll sit here and she'll make me sound like I have sense or something out there. So the proverbial question, how can we get more folks interested? That's a question that, I wrestle with. And sometimes I'm content, if I'm volunteering at one of your great Tennessee State historic sites or one of my North Carolina historic sites, and somebody, I see 30 or 40 people come through and they're interested. How can we grab those people more? When they show up at the library, how can
Mhm.
we grab those people more?
That thing is really connecting to them on that personal level. And again, not giving them too much. As people don't want to, and my background too is in radio and broadcast. People want quick information and fast. They don't want long form stuff.
Right.
Give it to them fast, and that's something we've got to work on.
What do you think about the digital world? You and I are chatting this evening here
Yeah.
on Facebook and on YouTube. Um, there are so many young people today that when they want information, it's online, it's
Mhm.
on YouTube. How can we better get into that world?
I mean, that's something we've all talked about, especially in the SCV, is as these younger people, and even and it doesn't have to be a young group. I mean, there's older, and when I'm careful when I say older, what is old, but we've got to get this information out there. The SCV, you remember, did some videos in the last three or
Right,
4 years that are little 3 to 5 minute vignettes.
right.
Those are really good, and they're well produced. They're professional. They give information. They connect to the local level to that person again. We've really got to gear towards that way and be careful. Like what we're putting out here today, we're talking good conversation, but there's some other stuff that's out there that's you don't want to air your dirty laundry as well. And a lot of
No.
organizations do that online, and make sure you're teaching people, that you're giving them good information that they're not going to find by just Googling it.
And I agree. We both get lots of questions. Um,
Hmm.
Well, I'll give you an example. Somebody will walk up to me at my night job, my moonlighting job, and they'll come up with something. And, I'll say, oh, I bet you read that on the internet. And, everybody will kind of laugh and there's a nervous pause and everything while they wait while I explain why it's good or bad. Um, there are a lot of people, that's their only source is Google or Bing, or I have no idea what any of the other search engines are. But
And it's not using JSTOR.
and it's not using JSTOR or any of these
Yeah.
other sources. We've got a great one here called NC Live
Hmm.
that they don't hardly ever access. So I guess we need to work harder on getting that information out
I'll
there.
give you an example of course, I spend more time watching YouTube with history related topics. These guys that are not the professional broadcast, but they do a good job. They're professional enough that it's well produced. Uh, there's one in Georgia. He goes through local cemeteries and they talk about the people that are buried there, just giving information about them, some short bios.
Right.
That's really good stuff. And it's got really good following. People really like that. And I think that's something we can do. Again, it's connecting to that personal level, that personal story you're telling.
Right.
Go to the cemetery, take your camera, and make a short 5 to 10 minute video and talk about some of those that are buried there. Tell their story.
That's right. That's right. We have watching with us this evening, Carol Fuller, and she does a fantastic job researching and talking online about the Great Wilderness Road. I don't know if you're that familiar with that, John, but that was that major artery out of came through Virginia and ran down into North Carolina and
Sure.
South Carolina, and it's bringing thousands of people from the mid-Atlantic states to the South, more or less. And that's she does a fabulous job with that.
Yeah.
And
well, I like our comment there. We need to teach people how to research outside of the internet.
that's right.
So I say, if you've never visited your local archives and really got off of Ancestry, again, it's great. Use it every day. But when you go to that local archives, none of this stuff has been digitized, and sit down and research. I think of my Revolutionary War patriot that came to Gibson County, died in 1836. We've got his estate papers, and I know what people purchased from his estate and how much you can learn about these people by just getting outside of the census records. That's great. Tells you who people are, but to really get down, learn more information about them and know how to, and when you go to an archives, what you're looking for, what kind of
Right.
records you need to go to. Do you need probate records? Do you need the local county court, like in Tennessee, which is your county commissions today? Do you need to go to those records?
Right. Fascinating stuff. I mentioned that trip to Raleigh 3 or 4 weeks ago. I was looking at the Office of Civilian Defense during World War II. There are 138 boxes
Oh, wow.
of papers from the governor and the secretary and all of these other people here just in North Carolina. And I imagine Tennessee is the same way. And literally an untapped resource when it comes to local history.
For example, our county here in Gibson County, we've got an archives. It's been in existence about 20 years, but in the last year or so, we've put a revamp to it. Our Public Records Commission has been reformed. And really taking these records that were still in the basement of the courthouse, these ledgers from the 1840s to the 1900-ish, and getting them taken care of, get them cleaned. And they've never been, a resource that's never been tapped into, that's full of great information. It's something we got to work on every day. And that's where we can help, I think, as historians and history buffs, is find places to volunteer, because if you're familiar with going into these archives, they need your help.
They do need your help. And I have encouraged, as I've traveled around speaking, I've encouraged people, take a day a month or a day a week and, go to your local history collection for the local libraries that still have one, and say, I'd just like to volunteer and just be available to talk to people. And that's just one way that every one of the folks watching this now and later can help. Just being that resource person. And I think, working in the museum world as well, people will come in and say, well, I don't want to volunteer because somebody's going to ask me a question I don't know the answer to. Well, that happens to me like every day.
Yeah,
And
I have the same
like,
thing. I don't know every answer. People say, well, you know all that. No, I wish I did, but
that's,
no.
I got home Thursday from Sycamore Shoals, and I had this note in my box of this fellow looking for this. He said a home guard captain from, I think it was Hawkins County, Tennessee. So I basically spent all day Thursday in Tennessee history. And, he wanted to know what was going on with this guy. And I did a little research for a couple of hours. And I said, well, first, he wasn't home guard. He was Confederate. And, but we don't even really know who that guy is. So I gave him some leads. And I think you or somebody mentioned it a few minutes ago about how we don't need to do everything for him. But I gave him some leads, and hopefully I'll hear back from him in a couple of days.
And it's all about teaching, as we said, that I want to help people, but and much as I love research and learning something new, I don't want to do your family history for you. I want to help you so you can do it, so then you can teach the next person how to do it.
That's right. Absolutely. Fascinating stuff. So, folks, if you've got any more questions, let's scroll back through here.
I saw one
Uh,
on the 46th North Carolina. I believe that'd probably be it was directed to me, but that'd probably be a question to you.
Yes, it is. And Corey and I have talked about it before, and we'll continue to have that conversation. Andrea's talking about errors existing in digital transcripts, and about why the letters and diaries are so important. And I think some of us, if you've not read it, there's a great book, good book that came out last year or the year before about Special Order 181 and the Maryland campaign and McClellan. There's actually two books. The one on McClellan, I think, is better. And about how the digital, not the digital, this was actually in the official records 100 plus years ago, about how the time on that is wrong. And so 120 years of historians have gotten a bad idea or the false idea about this timeline. And the gentleman who researched this actually went to the National Archives, and it took almost an act of Congress to get the whole document out there. But he's like, this is how we have messed up.
Transcription, it happens. I mean, years and years ago, something was written down wrong, or somebody wrote a book and couldn't read the writing well and changed the whole story by that.
You changed your family's last name.
It happened.
Census taker came by and he was partially illiterate. And
that's something here. The 1870 census for Gibson County is horrible. There are people left out of it. Names are spelled. Kids are, it's crazy. I don't know what the census taker was doing at that time.
It's 1860 here. The 1870 is a little better, but the 1860, it's like he missed whole groups. Whole communities, just
that's the way it is. There's whole in 1870. I've got some ancestors that I know are in this county, but they're nowhere to be found. But here's a question that me and a local guy were talking about. We're right after the war has ended. Of course, this area still, especially the Humboldt and Gibson County area, there's a group of federal troops that are here. There's a U.S. Depot, so to speak, as it's referenced in some local histories where they're stationed here after the war. I just wonder if some of these census takers, the one that did that, we know he was a Unionist. Did he intentionally exclude these Confederate veterans, or did they elude him? They didn't want to be on that. That's a question I'd love to be able to answer.
That is a fascinating question. Fascinating question. I'm curious there in your area, Gibson, Humboldt County, do the post-war late 1860s court records survive?
Yeah, most all of our court records are here. There's not a lot of activity and we're unique in Gibson County. We have two law courts. Humboldt, the city here, has its own court, which is connected with the county courts. Only like two of those left in the state like that. So, but we have all of our records are pretty, I say complete as in there's a good portion of them from that time exists, but not a lot of activity during that time.
In East Tennessee and Western North Carolina, the Federals are all sue happy. They are literally suing the former Confederates for, as they say, atrocities committed during the war. And that's really an untapped resource when it comes. Maybe other places as well. I've not really looked other places, but here in East Tennessee and Western North Carolina, it's a fascinating place. Nathan wants to know, can someone guide me on how to find info on Company B, Nelson's Rangers out of West Virginia? They didn't get any place when he called the local library. They were the 8th Virginia Cavalry. Nathan, we can talk about that. If you want to shoot me a note, maybe there's stuff in their compiled service records or in the pension applications, or we'll just have to sit down and look and see what we can find.
And those pension records, that's something you mentioned. It's a very good resource that I really started researching more here lately. How much more information you get, and from the official service records, how much that will vary.
Yes.
When you got these interviews with these local veterans, people they served with, and the stories they tell, just little tidbits, but you can get enough of that to really compile a lot about a whole unit.
Yes. And you are absolutely correct. I wish the Confederate records, and I found great stuff in them. I wish they were sometimes more like the federal records.
Yeah.
We've got a local quote unionist. His pension application is 3 inches thick.
Mm-hmm.
And I just, most of the Confederates are like, yeah, he served and we saw him serve, and
Yeah, it's
that's
it's
it.
simple. Just they answer the questions with 2 or 3 words, and
Yeah,
that's it.
I caught rheumatism during the war, and that's why I can't work anymore, and I need this pension, and that's just it. But let me encourage you, if you're interested, don't neglect those federal pension records. We've got a couple of cases here in the Toe River Valley where local Confederates are writing in saying, "Well, this guy was in the Home Guard shooting at
Mhm.
Union soldiers hiding out, and then 2 months later, he's gone off and joined the Federal Army."
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of good stuff in those federal pension records.
And
I wish,
research those units that were in your area, because
yes,
when they're applying for their pensions, they may mention they were in such and such city, or
yep.
and you'll learn information that way. Don't forget to look at those records, even though we may be Confederate and don't want to look at the Union side, but there's information there if you're
There's
researching.
a lot of good stuff, bad stuff at times, but a lot of
Yeah.
good
Mhm.
research material along the lines. And as I've often said, it comes one sentence at a time.
Yep.
Um, every once in a while you'll find 2 sentences and have a great day, but just one
Mhm.
sentence at a time.
And you take these multiple resources, put them together, and every one of them may vary some. That's something
Yeah.
I always tell people, that when I'm doing local history research, I get as many sources as I can and start to compare them and look what was probably real, what really happened.
Yep.
And there's always it's an opinion, it's a guess. There's sometimes we don't know the exact answer.
No, sometimes we don't. We have a lot of stories out there. David Pope mentions the Confederate exodus from Tennessee in the post-war area. It's not
Yeah.
just Tennessee. A lot of folks from Western North Carolina head west. I've got folks as far away as Coos County, Oregon, which is about
Mhm.
as far away from here as you can get. But Landon Carter Haynes is another great story,
Yeah.
and we talked briefly about him before we went live. He sold his property in East Tennessee, and just headed to Memphis. He stayed in Tennessee,
Mhm.
but
Mhm.
Memphis was as far as you could get from the banks of the Watauga River, where he was born.
And there's a lot that end up, of course, after the war, end up in Memphis. I mean, look, Jefferson Davis was there for a period of time.
Yep, he was. I think it would be interesting. I wrote a whole series on Memphis on the Looking for the Confederate War blog there for a while. I think it would be interesting to sit down and look at how many former Confederates wind up in Memphis, because Memphis
Mhm.
didn't, from my research, didn't start off all that pro Confederate at the beginning. They were kind of like, no, we don't know if we want any part of this. And probably a lot of that is tied to all of that trade coming down the Mississippi River
Mhm. That's
from
true.
up north. But maybe one day I'll pick that story back up and look at Landon Carter Haynes and Jefferson Davis and some of these other people that wound up in Memphis for a while.
And there's a
Jess,
lot of folks from our area that go to Memphis right after the war, which is just about an hour and a half away.
yep. Jess says, yes, it is William McKeeson Blaylock's pension that is 3 inches thick. He was kind of a local, what would be a good word? Well, I don't want to make anybody mad, but he's not that much of a unionist. He's more of an outlaw.
Mhm.
Mess.
So one of those interesting people.
He's a
In
character,
local
local
history.
character.
He's a local character, and I'm sure you have those over there in
Oh,
Humboldt
absolutely.
and Gibson County and those places as well. Scrolling back through comments. Andrea, you're right. Holding the actual letters in your hands at time can be fantastic. I've been blessed to be in a lot of archives and just fabulous stuff out there still waiting to find. So if you got any other questions, please drop them in the box, and we will see what we can do. And did Blaylock still get his pension? Interesting story about Blaylock. he got a huge pension right after the war
Mhm.
because his family said that he was totally disabled, and he was pretty shot up, but he couldn't feed himself, couldn't get dressed or anything. And then some of his neighbors complained, and when the official from the government showed up to check on Blaylock, he was not there. He had gone fishing.
Oh, wow.
So his federal pension was reduced after that event right there.
Wow.
But all kinds of interesting things in
Mhm.
that pension um, about some of his exploits during the war. Um,
Let me ask you this question. This is
yeah,
something has really become popular in the last 4 or 5 years. Using as a search engine almost for history research, genealogy is just using Facebook itself and just doing a simple search by names, family names, counties, cities. And it's amazing some of the people that you will find that have already researched some of this stuff. It's become a really good resource.
it has, and um, several years ago, I think more than a decade ago, I actually started a page called the Avery History Hunters for the county that I live in, Avery County.
Mhm.
Um, we have, I think, almost 27,000 members on that
Oh,
page.
wow. Yeah, we've got some groups here locally that are specific to certain things.
Yep.
I mean, they're great. It's a great way to connect, finding
Yep.
things all the time that way.
We only have 17,000 people who live in this county.
Oh, wow.
And so, our reach is really big. But, we've got a couple of people that I put up stuff. Of course, it's my page. But we've got a couple of people who put up a ton of stuff, sometimes 4 or 5 different posts a day that, hey, we found this old picture. Where was this place at? Who are these people? And it's not necessarily a genealogical page, but it is a history page.
Mhm. Mhm.
And if you're listening in tonight, and I think Bobby Joe Goodson did this for the county he lived in, Arkansas, recently. If your county does not have a local history page on Facebook, start one. It is a
Yeah.
great way to preserve history. Um, and I encourage you to absolutely do that. And Andrew's talking about being able to
Mhm.
track down some of her research interest. Frances Channing Barlow through Facebook and Ancestry. That is it's a fabulous resource if used properly. And there can be a little drama with it too from time
Yeah,
to time.
sometimes people don't stay on topic and they get a little rough at times, but
Yeah, a little rough, and
no.
sometimes you have to come in and be a dictator and say, we're not going to do this. uh,
Yeah. Have that
but
conversation elsewhere, take it
that's
private.
right. That's right. We were in a tight ship around here.
Well,
Uh,
we mentioned earlier talking about AI and something that a friend of mine has recently told me about that Family Search, if you're familiar with it and use it
yeah.
some,
Oh yeah.
they have a new AI tool that's still in beta testing that's been added. And it is tremendous because it's researching these, of course, all their files that are not indexed or searchable. And it does a really good job at that old handwriting and finding names. And of course, I've been researching some Wake County ancestors of mine,
Right.
and it's found records I've never found on there before by just typing in their name and it's reading those old documents. So a
It
tremendous
is.
resource.
It is amazing, and I have even used. I don't exactly remember which one, but one of the Google pieces where you take an old letter and ask them to transcribe it.
Hmm.
And it was like the couple that I played with were like 75, 80% correct.
Yeah.
Because, of course, I went through and reread it and, trying to pick up on that. But I thought that was amazing. I mean, I still don't quite trust it, but
Hmm. Hmm.
yeah, that information is there. Of course, the newspaper databases,
All those are great.
newspapers.com,
Mhm.
Library of Congress, they are just phenomenal at the amount of stuff that you can find.
And using, of course, newspapers.com there in the Nashville American is a big one, the Nashville Banner. I think it was the Daily American and some of the Memphis newspapers. But for my local city and county, tons of information from the 1880s to about 1910, 1915. You'll find little tidbits about people in the community and things the
Yep.
city was working on. Or we don't have those old newspapers here. They're all gone. They were never microfilmed. They were lost, but that still gives you that information, and it's good for genealogy. It's good for just local history.
Yep.
Use those resources.
Just tons of resources out there. Google Books. I don't know if your library has it or not, but there's one called Net Library.
Yeah.
Uh, Yep. Just sit down. I know when I was working on the book about Charlotte, North Carolina in the war, I literally would type in Charlotte NC 1861 on Google Books. And yes, it took a lot of time, but I went through every single entry and I found, stuff about federal soldiers. Charlotte was a federal prison for like a month in 1865. They're moving prisoners out of Florence, South Carolina. And, I found accounts that I would never go to a library in Indiana to look for stuff about Charlotte.
Mm-hmm.
But I found these accounts by these Indiana officers that were phenomenal accounts, and used those. Corey asked, what is the best site to use for newspapers that is free? The Library of Congress is free.
Yeah.
Just type in LOC newspapers, and it will pull that database up. North Carolina, I know Corey is in North Carolina, and if you type in NC digital newspapers, it'll pull up a bunch of newspapers that the state archives has digitized. I'm pretty sure Tennessee State has one as well.
Yeah, the state library has one. We have what's called the Tennessee Electronic Library for Tennessee residents. It's available. It's got Tennessee newspapers.
Yep. So let me encourage you, Corey, and anyone else, check out those resources.
And
I imagine other states has those as well.
Another resource that we talked about, Family Search. Now they're not indexed, but if you kind of Google down through there and search down through their different catalogs, you can find local newspapers by county, by city, by searching by that city. Now they're not indexed or not searchable, but you can go date, years, and remember that's stuff that's microfilmed in your state libraries. It's already available there.
My first job I had right out of high school when I'd started community college was making microfilm.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, that was back in the day. So if you got any other questions, please drop them for John or for me. John, anything else you want to talk about this evening?
Man, we've covered a lot of stuff, a lot of things going on. Of course, SCV is something I'm big involved in.
Right.
Currently Lieutenant Commander of the Tennessee Division, seeking the office of Division Commander in about 2.5 weeks away, and looking forward to kind of leading the division and things we've got to work on here. A good group of folks in Tennessee. I like to say I kind of brag on our division that we're the best anywhere in the whole world, but I know there's some other good ones too. But good things we've worked on, of course, the project that we just had in Jackson with Landon Carter Haynes, the folks up in East Tennessee spearheaded that and put that together. A great turnout for that event. Just lots of things the SCV is working on in Tennessee and some good projects we've got coming in the next couple of years.
Great projects. And I look forward to finding something else for y'all to work on.
Oh, absolutely. Hey, love projects. Nobody else is going to do this stuff, so we've got to do it.
That's right. That's right. So let's see here. Reading comments.
Yeah, I appreciate all the kind comments.
Yeah, our friend down in Australia is talking about getting worked up in Facebook, and that's true. And people do. I'll be honest. I try and stay out of a lot of the serious debates. Not that I'm afraid of anything. I'm not. But, I get a couple of dozen email a week of people looking for help. Like the gentleman I mentioned about the family, the soldier from Hawkins County, Tennessee, he was looking for help. And I would rather spend my time on those people that are really seriously looking than just arguing with people.
Yeah, you're not going to get nowhere. Their minds are made up. You're not. Our local SCV camp page is just, I say, going viral here lately with Confederate History Month posts. A lot of those comments, you have to block them, but I'm not going to sit there and argue with what our ancestors did. And they're just folks that are coming on there to troll and argue. They don't, if somebody sincerely wants to know, I'll talk with you, but sometimes the public forum is not always the best place to do that.
Sometimes it's no. And, a lot of y'all's ancestors are great. John, a lot of your ancestors were great. Some of mine were horse thieves.
Well, hey, I had some questionable characters along the way.
Yeah, fantastic. But their stories are interesting too. Just absolutely interesting. All right, folks, I think that's going to sign us off for this evening. We've rambled for actually, we'll go for another 30 seconds. So it's an hour even. But thank y'all so much for joining us this evening. John, thank you so much for being on here with
thanks
me.
for having me.
Sunday night history chat, giving up just a little bit of your Sunday night. And it's just been great. And I look forward to seeing you again sometime in the near future.
Absolutely.
I don't know when I'm going to make it to West Tennessee, but who knows? Maybe we'll get there soon.
I'm thinking about April of next year would be a good time.
April of next year.
Our division reunion will be here in my hometown, here in Humboldt next year. So it might be a good time to have you come
Well, you
down.
know, our North Carolina division is the same weekend this year as the Tennessee division. So,
wow. Well, hopefully maybe it'll work out next year.
We need to spread them things out a little bit.
Yeah. Everything's at the same time.
Yep. All right, folks. Thank you so much for joining me and John this evening here on Sunday Night History Chat. John, thanks for joining me in my library. Y'all have a fantastic week. Keep researching, digging, asking questions, sharing, and God bless.